As a cardiologist, I believe the keto diet is a mistake. The keto diet, I believe, is based on misinformation. And the general theme is that in the 1980s, the government told us to eat low fat. Then we ate low fat, and look at us now. We're fat and sick. It's a really nice narrative, but it's not true. We ate more of everything, including fat. So it's based, I think...
Ja, more fat, nicht weniger. Kennt ihr das Video, ne, von mir, wo ich die Graphen zeige? Das ist nie gefallen, das ist immer gestiegen.
On fake news. There's no long-living population that is consistently in a state of ketosis. And the one population that often comes up is the Inuit population. They live very far north near the pole and they eat a lot of fish. Well, they have similar heart disease rates as people in Canada. And actually, the Inuit population, they've selected for a mutation that makes it harder for them to go into ketosis, suggesting that it is not evolutionarily beneficial to be in a chronic state of ketosis. And if you look at the longest living populations in the world, the blue zones with the most centenarians, their diet is more than 50% carbs and primarily plant-based. There's no low-carb population in the blue zones. And there's a really, really interesting population called the Siman people. They live in Bolivia, and there was an article about them in 2017 in Lancet. They're an indigenous population, and they have the lowest rates of heart disease ever recorded in the medical literature. And how do they know that? They did CAT scans of their hearts. Like, they literally flew down CAT scan machines, like into the jungles of Bolivia. It's amazing. Their heart disease rate, if you look at them compared to a typical Westerner, their artery age, pound for pound, is 25 years younger than ours. What's their diet? 72% carbs. Okay, so the longest living populations are eating more carbs. The Siman people, lowest rate of heart disease in the world, have 72% carbs. And if you look at what are some of the things you are leaving out in the ketogenic diet, you're leaving out whole grains. You're leaving out fruit.
Ja, die Studie würde ich mal gern sehen. Muss ich mir mal aufschreiben.
You are, or almost all fruit, and you are leaving out pulses like beans and lentils. All of those things are among the healthiest foods in the world. If you eat, there was a wonderful study out of Lancet by Reynolds where they looked at 135 million person years of follow-up. That's a huge study. You follow me for 1 year in a study, that's 1 person year of follow-up. And they found the more whole grains you ate, the better you did. You lived longer, less heart disease, less cancer, less diabetes. Yeah, you ate more whole grains and you had less diabetes. You're leaving that out. How about the fruit? Similar kind of data. Dr. Du found in a huge population out of China, huge study. You follow me for 1 year in a study, that's 1 person year of follow-up. And they found the more whole grains you ate, the better you did. You lived longer, less heart disease, less cancer, less diabetes. Yeah, you ate more whole grains and you had less diabetes. You're leaving that out. How about the fruit? Similar kind of data. Dr. Du found in a huge population out of China, like 500,000 people worth, published in the New England Journal of Medicine and PLOS Online, the more fresh fruit you ate, the better you did. The less heart disease, less high blood
Wer hätte das gedacht? Je mehr Früchte du isst, umso gesünder bist du. Wer hätte das gedacht?
pressure, the less diabetes. Yes, you ate more fresh fruit and you had less diabetes.
Ja, wie soll es auch anders sein? Du kannst nicht Früchte essen und mehr Diabetes haben. Klar, Früchte sind, wenn du den Wassercontent rausrechnest, sind Früchte Zucker.
I'm getting sick of hearing about how fruit causes diabetes.
Ja gut, das ist ja nicht mehr normal. Wenn du sagst, Früchte verursachen Diabetes, das kann kein geistig gesunder Mensch sagen. Das ergibt dir keinen Sinn.
Beans and lentils, the pulses, also are associated with living longer. You leave all those things out, and then the ketogenic diet is helpful for people with refractory epilepsy in the pediatric population.
Right.
And And it started in this group in the hospital because there's so many side effects. There's pages and pages of side effects. Heart arrhythmias, mineral deficiencies, cardiomyopathy, fractures, kidney stones. They take it, they're very careful with it. I don't think a ketogenic diet is your friend. And as a cardiologist, I recommend my patients absolutely do not do it. Now, why do people consider a ketogenic diet helpful? There are two general categories. One category is weight loss. The other category is diabetes. Now, in regard to weight loss, a ketogenic diet
Diabetes. Jetzt bin ich mal gespannt, was der sagt. Also bis jetzt 100% Zuspruch. Ja? Bester Mann.
is helpful for short-term weight loss.
Ja, genau, weil du das Wasser verlierst, ja.
But so is cocaine. And what happens is if you don't eat any carbs, you use up your glycogen stores in your body. That's what glucose is stored as. And that holds water, so you use them up. You pee out the water, lose a little weight. When you initially start a ketogenic diet, you get something called the keto flu, and you feel a little crummy, so you eat a little less. And then the ketones themselves...
Also Keto Flu, ne? Krankheitszustand. Das macht man. Dahin geht die Reise. Man macht Low Carb, um einen Krankheitszustand zu erreichen. Und das will man dann den Rest des Lebens. Ja.
are water acids, so they help you pee out fluid. So in the short term,
Weil dann man will den Körper so tricksen, dass er nicht mehr auf Kohlenhydraten läuft, sondern auf Fett. Wow.
lose weight. But in meta-analysis,
Und wie das funktioniert, wie das Endergebnis ist, kennen wir von den ganzen, zum Beispiel dem Erfinder von Low Carb.
and then
Wir wissen alle, wie der aussieht und woran der gestorben ist. Ja? Und den ganzen Low Carb Buchautoren. Kennt ihr das?
ketones themselves are water acids, so they help you pee out fluid. So in the short term, you lose weight. But in meta-analyses,
Na, lass es mal hier einfach nur. Ja, das ist gut.
of multiple randomized trials of weight loss with a keto diet versus a higher carb diet, and you feel a little crummy, so you eat a little less. And then the ketones themselves are water acids, so they help you pee out fluid. So in the short term, you lose weight. But in
Warte mal, wer zum Henker ist das überhaupt? Warum sagt er alles richtig?
analyses, cells are water acids, so they help you pee out fluid. So in the short term, you lose weight. But in meta-analyses of multiple randomized trials of weight loss with a keto diet versus a higher carb diet, there's really only about less than a kilogram of difference in weight loss. And then, of course, you're leaving out all those healthy foods, and there's multiple mechanisms of potential harm when you're eating more of an animal-based ketogenic diet, from
Die Crew ist da.
iron to impacting the microbiome, to sialic acid, to LDL cholesterol, to inflammation, to oxidative stress, to antioxidants. The list goes on. I'd be happy to take a deep dive into those. That's weight loss. So I look at the weight loss thing, to be honest, as fool's gold. Diabetes, when you
Ja, aber hey, das hat er jetzt so gesagt, 1 Kilo nur Unterschied. Aber das funktioniert ja nicht, du kannst ja nicht damit abnehmen, außer du machst Hardcore-Kalorienrestriktion. Und guckst dir an, wie sie aussehen.
analyses of large randomized trials, longer term, showed that there's no significant
Guck dir an, wie alle High-Carber aussehen.
difference between a higher carb, low fat, and a ketogenic diet in terms of sugar control. Now, if you eat no
Aber
sugar,
jetzt das Diabetes-Ding, jetzt bin ich aber gespannt.
difference between a higher carb, low fat. Now, if you eat no sugar, your blood sugar levels will go down. But the issue is you're not necessarily reversing the underlying reason why you have the diabetes. We're talking about adult onset type 2 diabetes. You have diabetes in the first place. That's the insulin resistance. And you're just masking it by making it seem like your blood sugar is low. And what happens is when you're eating more animal products, you get fat. You're just masking it by making it seem like your blood sugar is low. And what happens is
Na jetzt.
products, you get fat deposits in your muscle and your liver.
Alter, wir kommen hier gar nicht voran.
And you're just masking it by making it seem like your blood sugar is low. And what happens is when you're eating more animal products, you get fat deposits in your muscle and your liver, causing insulin resistance, making it harder for the glucose to go from your blood into those places where it can be stored. Now, when you don't eat sugar, your blood sugar goes down, so it looks like you fixed the problem. But then when you sit within 6 feet of a donut, your blood sugar shoots up. So to me, reversing diabetes is not masking it, but actually being able to eat fruit and whole grains and not having your blood sugar go up. And we do have data from the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine where eating a plant-based diet can improve insulin resistance and improve beta cell, or the pancreas's ability to make insulin. I'm not aware of any data to that effect with a ketogenic diet.
Ja, ist ja viel zu krass, der Typ ist... Wer ist das? Ich weiß gar nicht, wer das ist. Aber so unfassbar gut, oh mein Gott. Einfach 100% korrekt, jede einzelne Aussage. Absoluter Mega-Empfehlung von mir. 100% korrekte Aussagen. Geil. Nur die eine Studie hätten die verlinken können. Dass die meisten Kohlenhydrate in der Welt essen, haben die niedrigste Wahrscheinlichkeit für Herzerkrankungen überhaupt. Ich meine, gibt es Studien dazu? Es gibt Studien dazu. Das ist... was wollte ich jetzt sagen? Es gibt Studien dazu. Es ist logisch, wollte ich sagen, dass das so ist, aber ich will Studien dazu sehen. Ja, ich habe es mir aufgeschrieben. Ich will auf jeden Fall... Ich meine, ich werde es ja finden, wenn er sagt, da gab es so eine Studie dann. Oder halt Untersuchung, Review, was auch immer. Wenn es Data dazu gibt, dann werde ich auch finden. Hier ist noch ein Video, ja, guck mal.
Dr. Saladino, when you're recommending this diet, what risks do you discuss with your patients?
I don't think there are any risks to eating animal
Oh nein. Nicht der Typ, please.
foods exclusively. There are no risks in terms of kidney function. There are many studies which show that high-protein diets do not affect kidney function. There are no studies interventionally that show that eating meat is going to increase the risk of
Aber dieser Typ da, das ist, ich will es lieber nicht sagen, echt.
any single cancer.
So after watching the Carnivore MD, Dr. Paul Saladino on the Doctor Show last year, I uploaded an excerpt of the same show where a couple of highly esteemed doctors
Weil
completely
man einfach auch hingehen kann und jede einzelne Aussage von dem mit Wissenschaft widerlegen kann.
schooled his diet nonsense.
Straight way to hell, oh yes. So einen schlimmen Menschen habe ich selten in meinem Leben gesehen.
I don't know what research you're reading, but there are literally thousands of studies showing the benefits of polyphenols. Let's start with those, for example, plant-based nutrients in the diet.
The National Institutes of Health just gave the Cleveland Clinic $12 million of our taxpayer money to study the impact of meat on TMAO and the microbiome, because there are 1,000
Oh, Meat and TMAO. Oh.
studies that are indicating harm. And I am a world expert on TMAO, Dr. Saleh. Don't take me on this. You will not be happy. I will not be kind. Wait 10, 20 years before you play with this dangerous diet.
So that was just an excerpt of a video that we edited together, and I believe we uploaded it to YouTube,
Ich weiß gar nicht, wie heißt mein Video so Fleisch und TMAO? Ich glaube schon.
Facebook and Instagram, and Dr. Paul Saladino clearly saw this video, he didn't like it, and then started messaging us privately, including sending this voice note, which you're about to hear.
That's weak sauce and you know it. I got schooled. If any of these doctors ever came on my podcast, I would show you what's up. If any plant-based doctor ever came on my podcast, they're all afraid. You'll see what's up.
Wow, he actually sent that to us on Instagram. I don't know if you heard that, but I think we should play it again.
That's weak sauce and you know it. I got schooled. If any of these doctors ever came on my podcast, I would show you what's up. If any plant-based doctor ever came on my podcast, they're all afraid. You'll see what's up.
Anyway, Dr. Paul Saladino's been all over YouTube in the last few months, and I was going to do a video questioning some of his carnivore diet claims, but then I saw a video by my friend
Ja, der ist für Carnivore Diet auch noch. Und sagt, das ist gut gegen Krebs und alles, was du willst. Das ist schon, also...
Chris, whose channel I'll link down below, who did an excellent job of debunking some of his diet philosophy nonsense. Hope you enjoyed the video.
Several friends asked me about the carnivore diet episode on Joe Rogan's podcast that featured Paul Saladino. Here's the thing. Paul looks like he could be Will Bolshewitz's brother. Both are good-looking, 40-something doctors with great physiques who publish best-selling books with completely opposing messages. Will is all about
Ich
plant-heavy
sag gerade, die sitzen beide in einem Boot.
diets like the Mediterranean
Wenn Brain Dead reinkickt, ja.
or whole plant vegan, whereas Paul is all meat all the time.
Ich würde zu gern wissen von so einem richtig krassen Psychiater, so einem Psychoanalyst, der Veganer ist. So der Beste der Welt. Und er würde mal so einen Typen analysieren, ne, was für ein Mensch der ist, wie man so werden kann.
How's a consumer with no scientific or medical background to figure out who got it right? Both are great guys who believe they're on missions to improve the world. But their
Great guys? I disagree.
messages are so opposite, there's no room for both to be right. Or is the
Frag Freud, frag dein Gehirn, frag gesunden Menschenverstand, frag Logik, frag Wissenschaft.
answer no one
You name it.
knows, so just eat to feel good. Paul got 10 times the views on YouTube in his interview with Joe Rogan than Will did
Ja, das ist auch einer. Puh.
in his interview with Rich Roll. But I think I can show very simply without confusing
Oh, und der Topmann. Von dem haben wir schon geguckt. Das Diabetes-Ding kennt ihr? 2-mal 1 Stunde. Der Podcast mit dem.
biochemistry that Will has 10x the
Bester
credible
Mann.
science on his side. Bold claim, let's go. Joe and Paul opened with this idea.
Is a talking point that I actually stole from you
Oh ja, da haben sich 2 gefunden, ja.
is that
Was ist das, ein Hirschgeweih? Wahrscheinlich ein echtes.
most
Ja,
plants
stimmt, der ist ja Jäger.
are inedible, but almost all animals are edible.
That's true.
Was war
Paul
das?
opened with this idea.
Is a talking point that I actually stole from you is that most plants are inedible, but almost all animals are edible.
Hä? Und? Was ist damit? Was ist das jetzt für ein Argument?
That's true, and not just for humans, but for any plant-eating animal like a cow, a horse, or a monkey.
Genau. Ja, was für eine Art von Argument ist das?
Does that mean they're better off eating meat? That experiment has been done carefully and published perhaps 1,000 times on various animals like
Dass man darüber überhaupt diskutieren kann, Mann. Wozu haben wir die Wissenschaft? Oh,
rabbits and pigeons and monkeys and pigs, you name it. It doesn't take much for their arteries to close up
hast du es da gepostet? Wenn du es gepostet hast, dann ist das bei mir hier drin.
like it did with these monkeys, which became totally blocked when 40% of their calories in this case came from egg yolks. Once they went back to eating predominantly plants, their arteries opened back up.
Ah ja, was ich euch noch sagen wollte. Es hat so ein Fitness-YouTuber mit knapp 200.000 Abonnenten oder sowas so ein Video gemacht, die 5 Lügen der Veganer und wie man sie debunkt. Und da, ja, ich werde das Video nicht analysieren und ein Video dazu machen, sondern, naja, das ist unterstes Niveau. Also ich habe da mal reingeklickt und ich sehe schon, wo die Reise hingeht bei dem. Ich habe da reingeklickt an eine Stelle im Video, an der Stelle sagt er, Zucker verursacht Arteriosklerose und Eier senken das Herzinfarktrisiko um 26%. Okay.
Up like this.
Ich habe das Video zugemacht und abgehakt. Fitness-YouTuber.
That only works for herbivores and omnivores. You can't give a lion heart disease with meat. But guess whose arteries of their calories in this case
Are inedible.
That experiment has been done carefully and published perhaps 1,000 times on various animals like rabbits and pigeons and monkeys and pigs, you name it. It doesn't take much for their arteries to close up like it did with these monkeys, which became totally blocked when 40% of their calories in this case came from egg yolks. Once they went back to eating predominantly plants, their arteries opened back up like this. That only works for herbivores and omnivores. You can't give a lion heart disease with meat. But guess whose arteries clog up if you give them a fair amount of meat?
Ach sowas, ne, solche Logiksachen. Wer ist denn der Typ schon wieder? Irgendwie einer sympathischer als der andere. Und der ist mir echt sympathisch mit den Avocados und der Pepperoni und so. Sieht übelst angenehm aus. Und ja, solche Sachen, solche Logikargumente, ne? Du gibst Hamudi-Hai, du gibst Löwen Fleisch und du kannst, in diesen voll mit Cholesterin, du kannst keine Arteriosklerose verursachen, weil es ihre Nahrung ist. Du gibst einem Menschen Fleisch, der kriegt Arteriosklerose.
Humans! Clogged arteries are the leading cause of death in America. And now we know from doing MRI scans on
Ja, Ernährungsbuchstaben, Cholesterinlüge, ja. Ja, es ist Kampf gegen Windmühlen.
prehistoric humans, those that ate much meat got it too. Here's Otzi the Iceman from 5,300 years ago, who had wild ibex meat in his stomach and had very advanced heart disease. Same with Inuits, who lived 500 years ago in Greenland, too. Here's Otzi the Iceman from 5,300 years ago, who had wild ibex meat in his stomach and had very advanced heart disease. Same with Inuits, who lived 500 years ago in Greenland.
I remember there was a story about a guy in a nursing home, and he had went out and picked mushrooms for the people in the nursing home and cooked them up, and they all died.
Are we really going to focus on death?
Oh mein Gott. Diese Argumente von Joe Rogan. Kill me, please. Habt ihr das mitbekommen? Habt ihr sein Argument gehört? Fuck off.
Meat in his stomach and had very advanced heart disease. Same with Inuits, who lived 500 years ago in Greenland.
I remember there was a story about a guy in a nursing home, and he had went out and picked mushrooms for the people in the nursing home and cooked them up, and they all died.
Are we really going to...
Das ist so ein krasses Anti-Vegan-Argument. Boah. Der hat Pilze gesammelt, die sind gestorben von den Pilzen. Boah. Vegan ungesund.
going to focus on death by mushroom in the middle of a pandemic that's killed 1.5 million people so far. It's not the plants that send out viruses to get us. It's the animals we raise to eat. The overwhelming incidence of food poisoning that emergency room doctors see comes from bacteria like Salmonella, which originates in animals. So I think that's -5 science points for Paul and Joe for insane logic.
Science Points, was ist Science Points, Mann? Dummheitspoints.
No data. The premise of the carnivore code is returning to our ancestral diet. It's on the cover of the book, and the early part of the book is devoted to it. Quite fascinating.
Die Menschen sterben aber von Salmonellen zum Beispiel, anstatt von giftigen Pilzen.
Here's the thing. People who devote their lives to
Ja,
studying
das ist so ein Anti-Obstbuch, ja.
the evolution of man say the idea of a paleo diet is a myth. People ate completely different diets depending on where they lived, just as modern humans do today. For example, Aborigines in Australia love grubs.
Then we hit it. Cut the road!
Does that make them good for us? Maybe pick up a bag at Amazon and see if your blood work improves. They make a unique snack around the office to impress your coworkers. Aborigines, like most ancient humans, dug up a lot of fibrous roots to eat.
The digging stick has been used by Australian Aborigines for thousands of years. It was of particular importance to Aboriginal women, as it was their primary means of digging up roots and tubers, which was the mainstay of their diet.
What separates the carnivore diet from every meat-heavy diet before it is Paul's belief that any amount of plants is toxic to humans. I'm trying to show respect, but let me read you a passage from his book and let you judge for yourself. As an aside, the whole premise that molecules that independently evolved in plants would somehow be beneficial in
Ja, die Frage ist, muss man noch Studien machen? Muss man das? Wenn es Mechanistic Data gibt.
humans sounds a bit far-fetched to me. It would be
Und man vielleicht an Gott glaubt.
highly unlikely for one molecule, let alone thousands of molecules produced during plant evolution, to truly be beneficial in humans after our evolutionary path diverged from theirs 1.5 billion years ago when we were little more than a single-celled blob. Imagine the odds against this! Exclamation point. I'm sorry for facepalming, but he really wrote that. Honestly, I think most high school biology teachers would give -10 science points for that, because coevolution of plants and animals is key to the world's ecosystems. Charles Darwin wrote about that in 1859 in Origin of Species. This is why I recommend listening to actual evolutionary biologists, not Paul.
I'm an archaeological scientist, and I study the health and dietary histories of ancient peoples using bone biochemistry and ancient DNA. So people who live in places where there are no plants tend to eat more animals, and people who live in places where there are plants tend to eat more plants.
The big question is, does it matter? We don't eat grubs and lizards anymore. We eat what we forage in Safeway. Isn't the most important thing which modern foods make modern humans with modern...
Kannst du das Fleisch da weglassen, what? Was macht der tote Kadaver da?
Lifestyles slim, vibrant, and healthy. Trying to figure that out from ancient fossil records is like extreme CSI, but now we have all the things: blood tests, MRI scans, and death records. And that brings up epidemiology, a field of science most of us revere when it comes to infectious diseases like COVID-19 and tracing its spread. Epidemiology is what helped us unravel the health effects of smoking. This is where Will has a huge advantage because he got a master's degree in epidemiology on his way to med school and has co-authored 21 scientific papers, plus 10 science points for Will. If you trust epidemiology, which Joe and Paul don't and Will does, then you believe the world's healthiest people eat plant-dominated diets. So why would epidemiology be
No shit.
so trusted by consumers in infectious disease, but not by the same consumers
Ich glaube, ich setze Logik über Wissenschaft.
in nutrition? Oh, I know the answer to that one because I lived it in earth science. Why would epidemiology be so trusted by consumers in infectious disease, but not by the same consumers in nutrition? Oh, I know the answer to that one because I lived it in earth science. In 1988, when acclaimed astrophysicist James Hansen, head of NASA's Institute for Space Studies, testified before Congress about global warming.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. Dr. Hansen, if you'd start us off, we'd appreciate it.
And then George H.W. Bush embraced it.
Those who think we're powerless to do anything about this greenhouse effect are forgetting about the White House effect.
Scientists thought at long last the science has become so clear and
Wow, das gab schon 1988, hat man schon darüber gesprochen. What? Boah, haben wir es vermasselt, ey. Tschüss.
obvious, this would become like science's increasing progress against smoking. We knew the coal and oil companies were coming for us like the tobacco companies were doing, but we had no idea they could successfully shake the faith in science of so many Americans and disrupt the careers of great scientists.
I've been arrested, I think, 4 times.
32 years later, it looks like Dr. Hansen's models were incredibly accurate, and science will end up on the right side of history as it usually does, hopefully not tragically late. Back to food, since all credible epidemiology points to plant-dominant diets being the best for health and long-term weight loss, the only thing for the beef, dairy, and egg councils to do was to discredit the science. They're the masters of it.
They were judged, convicted.
Bad rap, huh?
And put away for a long, long time. But now, new evidence shows it was a bad rap. Eggs contain 22% less cholesterol than previously thought.
All right, let the eggs go!
Which is why the American Heart Association has increased its weekly egg yolk allowance for healthy people from 3 to 4. California fresh eggs. Give them a break.
Why do I mention epidemiology?
What the fuck, habe ich da gerade gesehen und gehört. War ein bisschen schwer zu hören, habt ihr es verstanden?
Epidemiology? Because it's long term. Even if you smoke, it probably takes 20 years to have major impact. Paul has been on the carnivore diet for 2 years. He came to it as a psychiatrist who listened to the Joe Rogan interview with Jordan Peterson, a psychologist. How many times have clinical trials indicated the short-term safety of things like artificial sweeteners, only to find out 20 years later they weren't safe at all? But blood tests are a good short-term snapshot of health. So a great question is, what are the blood tests of carnivores? What's Paul's?
What would happen if you went to a cardiologist?
They would fall out of their chair when they saw my lipids. They would say
How
that
bad is it?
My most recent LDL was very high. It was 533 milligrams per deciliter.
What? The fuck? Das höchste, was ich jemals gesehen habe, darüber habe ich ein Video gemacht. Das war eine in einer Keto- oder Carnivore-Gruppe. Die hatte 300 oder so. 312? Normal. Was heißt normal? Gut ist ja unter 70. Die Menschen haben so... Ja...
Snapshot of health. So a great question is, what are the blood tests of carnivores? What's Paul's
recent LDL was very high. It was 533 milligrams per deciliter.
I went to the Mayo Clinic's heart attack risk calculator and tried to input Paul's numbers.
Unter 70 ist gesund.
It's based on an enormous database we have accumulated in America of risk factors. It even asks how many servings of fruit and vegetables you eat.
Okay, der Carnivore-Typ hat schon mal den höchsten LDL-Cholesterinspiegel, also das schlimmste Cholesterin, was es gibt, den höchsten Cholesterinspiegel, den ich je im Leben gehört habe. Na, das ist mal eine Leistung. Kann er sich auf die Schulter klopfen. Ich sag ja nicht diesen Menschen, ey, boah, nee.
Eat because the data shows that reduces risk, and how many servings of meat because the data shows that increases it.
Aber niemals vergessen, Leute. Eier und Fleisch und sowas, das Essen, das ist doch das Allerbeste, oh mein Gott. Leute, nicht vergessen, was sagen euch alle? Das Essen von Cholesterin, also von Tierprodukten, Fleisch und so weiter, hebt nicht den Cholesterinspiegel an. Das Essen hebt nicht den Cholesterinspiegel an, okay.
When they saw my lipids, they would say
How
that
bad is it?
my most recent LDL
Nicht.
was very high. It was 533 milligrams.
Oh. Oh. Ah, das kam von dem Obst, das er isst. Ach nee, der ist Carnivore.
Per deciliter.
I went to the Mayo Clinic's heart attack
Das
risk
ist einfach zu einfach, oder? Es ist zu einfach.
calculator and tried to input Paul's numbers. It's based on an enormous database we have accumulated in America of risk factors. It even asks how many servings of fruit and vegetables you eat because the data shows that reduces risk, and how many servings of meat because the data shows...
Der Zucker, das habe ich ja im neuesten Video von diesem einen Typen gehört. Zucker verursacht Arteriosklerose. Ja, deswegen sind die Menschen, die den meisten Zucker essen, haben die wenigste Arteriosklerose. Okay.
That increases it. It also wants to know your blood pressure, weight, how much you exercise, and whether you've ever smoked. But Paul...
Und niemals vergessen, wer hat das unterstützt? Welcher deutsche Veganer hat das unterstützt, diese Aussage? Der hat zwar nicht gesagt, dass das stimmt, aber der hat es unterstützt, indem er gesagt hat, hier, Lichtblick hat gesagt, das ist nicht so, und dann zeigt er actually eine Studie, gibt er in Google ein. Wisst ihr, wer das war? Wer weiß es noch? Wer hat unterstützt, wer hat diese Aussage unterstützt? Deutscher Veganer, YouTuber mit einer Brille. Wer hat das unterstützt? Der beliebteste vegane deutsche YouTuber Deutschlands. Wer hat das unterstützt, die Aussage? Das Kontervideo gegen mich. Weiß das niemand? Habt ihr sein Video nicht geguckt? Der Allglatte? Nee, nicht der Allglatte. Der mit der Brille. Ja, Mann, der Nico Rittenau. Der hat das doch widerlegt. Ich habe ja im Simon Teichmann-Video gesagt, wie kann man so einen Unsinn erzählen? Das würde ich ja wissen, wenn ich die Studien lese, da kommt nicht einmal das Wort Zucker vor oder Glucose oder sonst was. Wer hat gesagt, nein, irgendwas stimmt nicht. Hier die Studie, und da hat er die gezeigt. Also der hat ihn unterstützt dabei, bei der Aussage Nico Rittenau.
Paul's number blew up the calculator because it wouldn't take total cholesterol higher than 350, and his is nearly twice that. So I looked for other...
You went to a cardiologist.
...shows that reduces risk, and how many servings of meat because the data shows that increases it. It also wants to know your blood pressure, weight, how much you exercise, and whether you've ever smoked. But Paul's number blew up the calculator
Ach so, den Wert von 700, den gibt's gar nicht. Oder 500. Es geht nur bis 320. Was? Ach ne, das ist Total Cholesterol. Wait, what? Ach, der hat 700 eingegeben, damit LDL. LDL ist ja weniger als Gesamtcholesterin, okay.
because it wouldn't...
700 Gesamtcholesterin, ach. Mein Gott. Ach. Da tut mir das Herz weh. Kriege ich Herzrhythmusstörungen, wenn ich das nur sehe, ey.
take total cholesterol higher than
Und
350.
HDL, vergiss HDL.
And his is
HDL ist Werbung, nichts anderes. Es gibt kein gutes Cholesterin. Gibt's, aber ihr versteht, was ich meine. Hat null Aussage, HDL. Wenig, niedrig.
nearly twice that. So I looked for other carnivore blood tests. Here's a 28-day challenge where Joe, a 9-month high-meat eater, went vegan for 28 days, and Chase, a 10-year vegan, went high-meat for 28. 4 doctors who are on various diets themselves commented on the blood work where the key numbers went like this. LDL cholesterol in the vegan more than doubled to the high-risk category, and the high-meat eaters dropped in half to the low-risk category.
Ah ja, das ist ja lustig. The fuck? Von 47 auf 119 LDL. Aber 47 hat, was ist das denn für einer? Was ist das, Fruitarian oder was ist das?
Dropped in half.
47, da bist du Heart Attack Proof. Du kannst keinen Herzinfarkt kriegen. Unter 70 kannst du keinen Herzinfarkt mehr kriegen.
To the low-risk category.
47 habe ich noch nie im Leben gesehen. Insulin. Ha. Aha, Insulin ist gestiegen. Ach, nee. Vegan heißt Kohlenhydrate, hat er ausgetauscht mit Fleisch. Das sind keine Kohlenhydrate und sein Insulin hat sich verdoppelt. Aber ich dachte, das liegt am Zucker. Ups. Oh. Oh.
Insulin dropped while eating vegan and increased while eating carnivore.
Oh no shit. IGF-1, not bad.
IGF-1, which is linked to a risk of cancer, dropped while eating vegan and increased while eating carnivore. C-reactive protein, which is a
Alter, wir hatten diese Arbeit gemacht, da kennt sich aber jemand aus. What the fuck, C-reactive protein, ne?
measure of inflammation, dropped dramatically when the carnivore went to.
Guck mal, du siehst hier den Beginn, ne? Beim Veganer 0,4, beim Fleischesser 5,1. Was wählst du? Welche Entzündungswerte willst du haben? Die hier oder die hier? Hä? Shit.
Vegan, although that number bounces around a little bit. It's high after you run a half marathon, for example. I'll put links in the description to the pretty informative and entertaining live stream where Joe and Chase get revealed their blood tests in real time. It was far from a well-controlled scientific test, but the only person it seemed to really surprise was the carnivore doctor who said these guys must not be eating nose to tail. Too many muscle meats, not enough organ meats. They didn't identify who the doctor was who made those comments, but it sure sounded like Paul. The Joe Rogan-Paul Saladino episode got millions of views, although I think it's unlikely that any came from doctors or scientists. The guys who switched diets got a few 100,000 views across several YouTube channels, and it was interesting because data. But we do have massive data carefully collected by real scientists. Most people have vaguely heard of the Framingham study, where we
Ich kenne die.
have 1 million blood samples collected over 70 years and rooms full of medical records from 15,000 participants.
Das war die Herzstudie, die ja berühmteste eigentlich.
Almost every part of the body that could be imaged, measured, or tested, Framingham has done that.
It doesn't get the YouTube views, but it's massively respected among cardiologists and scientists, and the conclusions are ever so clear.
High blood pressure, smoking, high cholesterol.
When Joe asked Paul about his high numbers, Paul went into science denial mode using word salad with technical terms, which seemed to really impress Joe.
And then you start to look at people outside the norm like yourself, and you go, okay, this guy has spent so much time thinking about this stuff. Maybe he's got some insight that other people have not acquired.
Actually, Paul's only been thinking about it for a few years and hasn't been involved in any scientific studies. But thankfully, we have national treasures like Jeremiah Stamler, who's still massively respected at age 100 and still actively doing heart disease research funded by the NIH after doing 800 publications. Dr. Stamler helped scare the beef industry into major science denial mode way back in 1969 with comments like this.
I would underline the fact that the distribution of serum cholesterol in the population, the mean levels, the rates of hypercholesterolemia differ markedly among these countries, and along with that, the coronary rates differ, and only diet can explain these differences.
How about this 80-something Olympic gold medalist?
Wow, was für eine Aussage. Only diet. Only. Look at this.
And rowing, Bronze Star surgeon from Vietnam, distinguished scientist and surgeon at the Cleveland Clinic, who fixed Bill Clinton's heart disease and weight problems without surgery. Here's how you explain things without technical word salad.
Coronary artery disease is the leading killer of women and men in Western civilization. And yet, the truth be known, it is nothing more than a toothless paper tiger that need never exist. And if it does exist, it need never ever progress. This is a foodborne illness.
But Chris, how about just eating till you feel good? Isn't that the ultimate in common sense? Paul and Joe mentioned that a lot. This is where I have to give plus 10 science points to Will, who makes his
Ihr seid ja auch so gefesselt wie ich.
living looking inside you with a
Von diesem mega korrekten Typen, den ich nicht kenne.
colonoscope. How many people do we know who looked and felt fantastic just before getting a heart attack, ulcerative colitis, or colon cancer?
For example, in a patient just this past week, I had a patient who was 50, and I found a huge polyp. So his colonoscopy saved his life, because if he never had a colonoscopy, he would have had colon cancer.
And what does he say about risk factors for colon cancer?
Every 10 grams of fiber that you consume gives you 8 to 10% reduced risk of developing colorectal cancer. That doesn't mean, unfortunately,
Meat has no fiber, genau. Wer isst Ballaststoffjoghurt?
that you can eat 100 grams of fiber and reduce your risk to 0. But what it does mean is that a high fiber diet is to our benefit. And here we are in the United States, and the average person is only getting 15 grams of fiber per day, which is
15 Grams. Ja, ich krieg pro Ballaststoffteller kriege ich 50.
minuscule.
Also hört sich ganz gut an.
Nothing.
Finally, I know some of you wonder about the planet.
Die brauchen 3 Tage dafür.
And Paul is well known for headlines like this.
Aber danach ist der Stuhl wirklich ziemlich groß. Aber das flutscht gut.
You know, as someone who has spent 16 years as an earth scientist, I feel pretty confident in saying I think this spry 93-year-old is a better authority to listen to.
Whenever we choose a piece of meat, we too are unwittingly demanding a huge expanse of space.
The planet can't support billions of large meat eaters.
That was a really hard episode for me. So much science denial on topics that matter so much, it's hard on the soul. But the good news is the science is really clear that eating a plant-predominant diet is the best thing we could do for our health and the planet. I hope this was helpful, and thanks so much for watching.
Ja, ist ein geiles Video, oder? Hammer. I like. Ja, das waren echt 2 Top-Videos. Low Carb Keto.